listening to the Overfunctioning Podcast Chat Sessions, connecting leadership concepts and local leaders.
Hello, friends. You're listening to another chat session with me, Alex McMahon, and today I'm here with Stacy Utecht. She says hello.
Yo, it's me, Stacy.
And just a few background details here about Stacy. Stacy worked for Malone University for 9 years as a resident director. She is currently finishing up a pre-college summer program at Skidmore University as a resident director. She has a master's in higher education, and her thesis was in leadership development. She is the aunt of 5 beautiful little girls. She is an awesome human, funny, humorous, a world traveler, an adventurer, and best of all, my friend. So,
oh, so nice.
Why, hello, Stacy. So,
hello, world.
We are going to allow Stacy to give all of her knowledge that she can muster up here about leadership. And with that, I will start with this question to you, Stacy Utecht, what is leadership? What makes a great leader? Go.
Whoa, wow. You've asked a loaded question, Alex McMahon. I will do my best to talk about some of the things that I feel like I've learned, which is not comprehensive by any means. But like Alex said, I did my thesis in my master's program on leadership development. And I feel like I just studied a lot about the history of leadership development and then some current practices that I feel like are helpful. And so I'm just going to throw a bunch of book type information at you, but things that I feel like are pertinent to the conversation, and then we can discuss after that. So everyone buckle up. This is just a lot of stuff. And I'm going to be reading my notes, so this is not professional by any means, but I didn't want to miss anything. So basically, history of leadership development, as far as I know. In the 19th century, there's been a lot of studies on leadership development, but some of the earlier theories that were emerging were, just really elementary at best. I think people didn't really know how to define leadership, and so they had this thing called the great man theory, where they looked at prominent figures in current culture, and they looked at these men and said, what makes them great leaders? And then that is what leadership is. So they looked at men like Abraham Lincoln, Julius Caesar, Mahatma Gandhi, and they kind of picked out certain qualities that they felt like a good leader was. So a lot of these leaders were they were men. They, some of them had loud voices. Some of them had like strong jawlines. So again, like this really 101 basic idea of like, we think we know what leadership is, but we think that leaders are born and not made. And so some people are just natural born leaders, and then the rest of us aren't. So then basically it kind of shifted into this thing called the industrial paradigm, which basically meant one person who's a leader and all the rest are followers. So it really was just more like good management. The leaders are active, the followers are passive, leaders are dominant, and followers are subordinate. And so it really was much more about like one person getting up, leading a group, and it just being much more about good management. In 1978, this dude named James Burns revolutionized preceding thought on leadership by proposing it as a collaborative effort and one that creates transformational change. And so that was really new. And to see leadership as much more transactional and transformational was just this new concept. But basically, he proposed it as a group of people who are working towards a common purpose interdependently. So it still did have hints of the industrial paradigm. This still was kind of this one person casting a vision and other people following it. But later on, this guy named Joseph Ross collaborated with Burns, and they built onto his theory of leadership, stating that leadership is an influence relationship among leaders and followers who intend real changes that reflect their mutual purposes. So leadership was now this idea of being like, it's much more rooted in relationship. There's no more authority. There's no more passive followers. They actually use the term collaborators quite a bit. And so it really did start shifting into a post-industrial style of leadership, which was an interactive process between leaders and followers that's transformational, values-centered, non-coercive, and collaborative. So now the focus was basically on the achievement of the collective. So while there might be one person kind of orchestrating something or a group, it's the participation and commitment of the team members that produce real change. And so leaders and followers can be interchangeable. So like if you and I are working in a group together, there might be a moment where I rise up and I share my opinion or I spearhead a vision, but then I sit back and then I become a follower while you might be rising up and leading something as well. And so there's not just like this one person who's in charge of everything. We rely on one another to get the job done. So because of this, development of the individual became really important. So we're not now seeing leadership as this, I'm born with it, or I'm a natural born leader. Leadership qualities can actually be taught and learned. And so there's, in my paper, I talk about this. And if you're interested, I encourage you to look this up. But there's a Center for Creative Leadership that produced a handbook of leadership development, which proposed multiple capabilities that could be used to indicate growth in the development of leadership. So again, some of these qualities are innate, but some can develop and improve over time. And so I have it here. I'm just going to look at it really quickly and just read you a few off the list. And some of these might make sense to you, but these are, again, qualities that people would say these are capabilities that would be used to say, like, this person has leadership qualities. So the ability to lead oneself, self-awareness, ability to balance conflicting demands, ability to learn, leadership values, leading others, ability to build and maintain relationships, ability to build effective work groups, communication skills, ability to develop others, ability to think and act strategically, creatively, and ability to initiate and implement change. And so those are just a few of the qualities that they listed as like, these are characteristics that can be developed and improved over time, but these are actually these are good leadership qualities. And so some of the methods towards improving leadership qualities in an individual could include multiple methods. Sociocultural discussions, engaging in difference is a huge one. Mentoring, community service, and positional roles. So at the end of the day, kind of this like rough idea of leadership is that it's relational. Leaders and followers interchange, but obviously with respect and trust built into that relationship. It's collaborative, and it's a behavior and not a role, which I think a lot of people mistake. I think people look at people in roles and say like they are leaders, or I need to have a role in order to be a leader. But they're saying it's much more about your behavior that you're exuding than being in a role. And that leadership uses influence to create change. So that's just kind of like a few things that I learned and just kind of wrote about in my thesis, but that's my idea of leadership, I guess, and a little bit of history behind it.
Awesome. Well, I would love to unpack some of these things. So let's just start here. So let's start with this great man theory that you talked about, where they've just identified like you're born with it, and you're not really made. And let's just start here. What are your thoughts just on that overall? This great man theory. Let's start there.
I mean, I think, yeah, like I said, it was kind of their first stab at what leadership is. I think that, I think people have a misperception of what a good leader is. Oftentimes, if you were to stop anybody in the street and say, what is a good leader? People are going to be like, oh, the person who is first to speak up, or the person who gets in front of a group to say something, or people who can corral other people and lead them towards a common goal. Or, so in some ways, like even today we have these hints of the great man theory, because I think subconsciously we all think the person who's the leader is the more dominant figure, when in fact, I disagree with that. I think I've worked enough with groups of people, and even with people who think they have a lot of leadership qualities, but then I look at someone who's really quiet and reserved and in the corner, and I actually think that they have a lot more leadership capabilities than the person who's just has the loudest voice. And so I think we do have misperceptions on what great leadership is, because we look at the people who are the most outspoken and the most energetic and extroverted as being the best leaders, and that's not true. So
Yeah, why do you think that's like a biological thing? Where does that stem from, do you think?
what?
Like the whole, like, okay, so like it's not really been taught, right? So we talk a lot about in our podcast about how like just hard to figure out what leadership really is, because it's been made so vague to us over the years. So if there's not really a criterion that's out there, like why do you think people just go ahead and jump to this method of choosing their leaders in such a way that is this great man theory?
Well, yeah, and I mean, I think like we've definitely made strides, and people wouldn't like they wouldn't go that far, I don't think, but I don't know. I think you just like, if you were to be in a group of people and we have to work towards a common goal together, everyone's going to always look to the person who can corral people with their loud voice, or if they have they think they have a really good idea, then they're like, oh, that's the leader in the group. When the person who's in the corner kind of like working out the details isn't seen as the leader. But that would be what like later theories would say is the actual leader, a leader in a group. It could be multiple people and it's interchangeable. So you and I aren't like, there's not a dominant figure anymore. It's us working together collaboratively towards a common goal that makes me and you a good leader. Yeah. So,
do you see any examples of that today, or have you been under a leader who was kind of put in more of, I mean, you even talked about a role in which they weren't meant for, or because it seems like a great man theory is like almost positional in a lot of ways, like they got that position because they were the loudest, and so, but as you've already said, it's not about the position. But do you see that today still? Do you see where, or do you have an example of somebody who's been through this, almost this great man theory, that you could share with us?
I mean, I'm sure I don't actually have a specific example that comes to mind. Like, I think I've worked for people like that who just are in the position because they were hired for it, but that doesn't mean that it actually fit their unique talents and abilities. And I think that makes it hard for a department or for the people that are working for you, because it's clear that you're not working in your giftings to accomplish a goal. You're just kind of there for the paycheck. So yeah, I've seen that for sure. But
okay, so let's kind of go down that path a little bit. So if you've been in that position, I don't know who it is. You don't have to describe obviously, their name or anything. Within that role in which you had somebody who was put in a position above you that was just clearly not supposed to be there, or whatever. Did you experience like somebody else taking their place in leadership that was a different leader? And could you describe like what that changed and what that looked like maybe?
So somebody who like took leadership instead of that person, I'm maybe a little confused.
Yeah. So let's say you had person A, who is this great man theory leader. Were you long enough within a position where you were able to see person A be bumped out by person B, who had a different theory on leadership? And can you describe maybe how that changed things and what that looks like?
Yeah, I probably haven't had much experience with that, honestly. Like, I've people who have just kept their roles, but I would say like then what usually happens is the people who work underneath that person will start to just lead on their own, like do their own thing, and not necessarily counter to the goal, but just continue to do what they feel called to do, without the effective leadership of that supervisor. But I would say it would have only ever increased our effectiveness if we felt like we had someone that we could look to really to help us collaborate, to help us get towards a common goal in a more effective way. So not that it's super destructive, I would just say it's not always helpful.
Yeah.
So.
I feel like I'm like sauntering you down like this path because I know you, and like I went to Malone, so I know like the different presidents, and you were there for 9 years and you saw different presidents. Could you kind of describe, like, how many different presidents were there when you were at Malone?
So just two presidents and then one interim.
Okay. Between those three people, which one do you think was most effective and why?
Ooh. I feel like I didn't really get that much interaction with the presidents. Like their decisions obviously affected us, and the state of the
Yeah.
institution doesn't always rest on the decisions of that president. But I mean, they all were so different, I would say, in their leadership style. Like I don't, I would say our interim was probably best received among the student body, but he was just an interim too, so he wasn't having to make some of the hard decisions that the other presidents were having to make, and so maybe that's why people viewed him differently. Um, but he was just, I mean, he was definitely much more like amiable, and I mean, not that none of them were, they were all really kind, nice people, but yeah, I couldn't really give you an answer for that because I didn't work closely enough with the president to
Yeah.
make an informed judgment about their leadership style. It was only what I observed from a distance,
Okay.
if that makes sense. But
Okay. But as you said, like, even with the interim, there was a palpable change, maybe? I mean, as far as the effectiveness of the student body, you said that the student body was better receiving of this person. Is that because that person was already on staff before?
yeah, he was on staff before, but the students, I mean, I think just because he was he was much more of a soft spoken, kinder, not kinder, but just kind guy. And we had come off a season of having a more difficult leadership. And so I think maybe that was part of what
Yeah.
people responded to.
Yeah, would you
So,
say that he was more relational?
um, I think they were all relational, but all in different ways. And I think that's the thing with leadership is like
Yeah.
everyone is different in the way that they project their leadership or how they view their leadership, and there's really no one cookie cutter way of doing it. And so that's why it's hard for me because I can't like I don't stand in a place of judgment in the way of how other people exude their leadership. It's only how I perceive how I lead and how others around me that I work daily with lead. And so I think like that's actually a comforting thing is to know that you don't actually have to look a certain way. You can be
Yeah.
any type of leader. Like if you're more quiet or if you're louder, like you can utilize leadership in your own life in different ways. And so somebody actually brought to my attention the other day that most of the presidents of our country are introverts. And so I think that's really noteworthy because a lot of introverts don't think that they are leaders. And I think sometimes more extroverted people are highlighted in media as being, like I said, the most outspoken, and so people follow underneath that. But I actually think some of like the people that I've worked and students that I've worked with who are more reserved are sometimes the better leaders, even than me at times, because they have different values that they have that are really thick with meaning. And so, yeah, like all that to say, like it's hard for me to pinpoint one person and say like, oh, they were a good leader or they weren't, because they were just doing leadership for how they felt they were best suited to do it. But I think like just drawing back to the principle of like everyone has the ability to be a leader and to learn how to be a leader. Um, but it does take development of those characteristics, like some of the ones that I just was talking about before, like self-awareness and ability to like have compassion, ability to work well with others or to develop others. Like sometimes leadership can be seen as what's in it for me, and really good leadership is actually like how can I benefit my community or the people around me over myself and promoting myself.
So how do you get somebody there? So you have worked with a lot of different women over the years, and you've had a great impact on them. So you've clearly have done some things correct. How do you get somebody to the point to where they are able to be more self-aware and they're able to develop themselves over time? What does that look like? How have you done that?
Right. Well, I think my approach again is going to be different than somebody else's approach. I've worked with multiple RDs, resident directors, in my past at Malone, and everybody has a different handle on how they do things. And so I'm not saying my way is the right way, but the way that I feel wired in leadership is to build relationships and to live life with students to the point where I can see in them things that they don't see in themselves, and then call those things out, whether those things are negative behaviors or destructive behaviors or immature attitudes that aren't actually developed, like they're not like good leadership qualities. And then I work to either call them out, to speak truth to them, to say like, I think you're actually better than this, and then to give them really good tangible ways to grow. So like, for instance, I mean, I think in the past few years, the tendency for students to draw to social media instead of authentic connection is huge. And so there is something about equipping them with information about studies and research that have been done that, like, social media, your smartphones are actually detracting from authentic community. And then really being able to say to them, like, I actually see in your life how this is detrimental to you. And so can I challenge you or push you in this to value the person in front of you over what you're seeing on your screen? And so that's just like a small example, but you have to live life and build trust with people and respect before you're given that place of authority in their lives to speak into areas where they need to grow. And so for me, that's worked effectively, but that's not a sprint, that's a marathon when you're talking about developing leaders like that. But I would say one of the biggest things that we do in residence life, and I think needs to be done more in general in our society, is engaging difference and interacting with people who have different views and opinions and backgrounds than us. And that is one of the indicators in my studies that is the biggest promoter of leadership development, is being able to interact with people who are very different than you and come to places of harmony and trust and peace in one another. So I think, like, we don't do enough of that. You're typically drawn to people who are very similar to you. And that can be a good thing in some ways, because that's where some of your best friends are, the people who share your values and see the world the same that you do. But if you're not engaging people who are different than you, then you're missing out on something huge, and you're probably not developing yourself as a human being in the ways that you should. And you're not seeing the world in ways that are diverse.
So how do you do that?
Yeah, I think, like, it's just really as simple as putting yourself in situations and in circles where you're uncomfortable, and trying to interact with people who are not like you. So maybe seeking out people who view faith differently than you, people who have different sexual identity than you, people of different races, people of different economical backgrounds, and just getting to know them and not having an agenda in relationships, but saying, like, you're a human being and I'm a human being and I want to get to know you, and can we have dinner? Or, like, going into spaces and places that will engage you in different topics in different ways. So maybe attending a seminar or going to a conference that's something completely different than you normally would, or going to a church with a different faith background and not being afraid to engage in conversations with people. So I think we do shy away from talking with people and relating with people who make us feel uncomfortable or who we totally disagree with. But if you don't do that, then you're not actually progressing yourself, and you're not in the ways that you think and things that you believe.
Oh yeah, I mean, literally as you were talking about that, I wrote down the word uncomfortable right here, because it's uncomfortable, and I think that knowing you well, is that you are an adventurer. You like to go out and experience different things, and my guess is that you are also extroverted, but like this development or this discipline, I would almost say, of being able to put yourself out there to be with different people is something that has developed over time. But then knowing you and knowing my walk as well, my journey, is that as I do that more, life gets more exciting. Things become more interesting. People become more real, and I think it's really, really helpful, just the overall life. Like, it's not even as far as when it connects to leadership. I'm a big believer that everybody's a leader because everybody has influence. It doesn't matter who you are influencing somebody. And so if you can kind of connect that to what you were saying about getting out and noticing differences between people, and like taking out the leadership part out of it, even though if everybody's a leader, it really does enhance your life to know people's differences. And
Yeah,
so,
for sure.
Yeah, and I love what you talk about when it comes to relationships, and the way that you've connected with different people has been inspirational to me, and I know inspirational to the girls that you have been a part of their lives. And so I think there is definitely something to be said about reaching into people and saying that I'm willing to walk with you on this journey, and not just for like these 5 seconds, but for like a while. And I love how you are able to challenge people. And we'll talk about two different things within our podcast about acute anxiety and chronic anxiety. And chronic just sits there until somebody brings something up. And sometimes chronic doesn't go away. Acute is more that fight, flight, or freeze. But you can change chronic anxiety into acute anxiety. So when you bring up to somebody that you're mentoring and you're turning into a leader, and you say, look, I see this in your life and I want to challenge you on that. That's like taking that chronic, I see this, it's been sitting here, like, and now I want you to do something about it. Like, I'm turning this into chronic, so you need to do something about it. And I think that is super uncomfortable, but is very needed. And I would say that within our society right now, it's something that is lacking greatly because it causes this uncomfortableness, and people don't want to be uncomfortable. And so, but yeah, any thoughts on that before we wrap up?
Yeah, I mean, I think people, I think that people have to feel a level of trust and respect before they hear those things. So you can't, like, if you're looking to develop a leader out of somebody younger than you, or maybe even a peer, you can't just like burst into their lives and say like, I see this and it needs to change and you need to change it. Like, it almost has to come from a place where the person is asking you for help and asking you for your thoughts and your opinions, and then the door is open to you. But I mean, I've come to a place with a lot of the women that I disciple where they're not necessarily asking for it, but after I've pointed something out, but it's, you know, like it is received, but that takes a lot of time typically. And then sometimes it's not received, and you have to be prepared for that as well. But I think you're right when you say that there's a real lack in our culture of people who are walking alongside other people to help them grow. And that's something that I want in my life. I want people asking me the hard questions, but I would say a lot of people aren't used to that. And then you'll feel pushback, you'll feel resistance, because some people don't want to change and they don't want that growth. And so what gets people to that place, I don't know, besides consistency and relationship and just you going back continually and just saying, I love you, I care about you, not coming at the relationship with like, I will love you once you change this. Like, no, I love you right now. And then because I love you, I want to see this growth in you.
Staying connected.
That will make leadership, and to express, I mean, again, we're talking about somebody speaking into the lives of younger students. This might be different for you in your journeys and what, you know, circles you've been placed in for influence. But for me, to like call someone out, there, like call the greatness out of them, like, they feel uncomfortable with that because they don't really actually believe in themselves, nor do they have the self-esteem to back it up. And so if you can call it out and say, I believe in you because I've seen you do this and this and this, and then push them to do something and then follow up with it, like they feel so empowered and they feel so able, and they are able then to articulate how they saw themselves rise up and meet a challenge, and then they feel like ready to do it again. And so it's very rewarding, I think, to partner with people in their journeys. But I think it's also worth noting that we are always people in progress. And so even you as the mentor, like everyone should be always seeking people who are doing this to them in their lives. And like, you're always in a place of growth.
Yes, most definitely. I love it. So good, Stacy. But we are going to come to an end now.
Okay.
And it is great talking to you, and all this relational stuff and what you had to say about that is so good. It just it warms my heart to hear what you have to say. And so, nice. Well, thank you, friend, for coming on, and we'll talk again soon.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, yep.
Bye-bye.